So I'm here today with one of our newest attorneys at Spar Bernstein, Abadir Barre. Abadir is an immigration attorney. He also practices exclusively, not exclusively, but practices predominantly in removal hearings and federal litigation. As a matter of fact, he's here today to discuss one of the cases he just handled, the Spar Bernstein case, where there was a gentleman who was being detained by immigration for more than 90 days. Immigration was refusing to release him. They didn't even give him any paperwork to give any reason why he was being held. And eventually what Abadir did was he took his case all the way up to federal court and had a federal judge rule that what immigration was doing was illegal. First of all, thank you for joining me today, Abadir. You've been at the firm 8 weeks or thereabouts, and you're doing unbelievable work as it is. But before you came to the firm, you were an attorney somewhere else, and before that, you were born in another country. You were not even born here in the United States. So I know being an immigration attorney is very close to your heart because you did immigrate to America from another country, especially to escape a civil war. Tell us a little bit about your background first.
Yes. So my family and I are originally from Somalia, and we immigrated here in the early 90s when I was 8 years old. We had a terrible civil war in Somalia, so we came here and sought political asylum and went through the whole, immigration process, got the political asylum, green card, naturalization, all the way through.
So you're a naturalized citizen, but you originally came through asylum and from Somalia,
correct.
Escaping civil war.
Yes.
And this is a country that Trump says you can't come to.
Right, yes.
How does that make you feel?
So that's terrible to when he had his Muslim bans last year. I actually wrote an op-ed about it because his ban was so arbitrary in saying that everybody from the list of countries or people that were Muslim were a national security threat and couldn't come here. So he just painted a wide brush on everybody, and without our immigration process vets people individually. So if this was now, me and my family would not have been able to come.
What do you think? What do you think would have happened to you and your family had you stayed in Somalia if this was now, and Trump was president 20 years ago when you immigrated to America thereabouts, and 20 years ago, I guess President was Bush then.
Yes.
When you immigrated, what do you think would have happened to you if President Bush had said people from Somalia are not allowed to come to America?
We would have been stuck. We would have,
where do you think your life would have been?
Totally different. I mean, I have other family that never got out of Somalia, and they went through a rough patch. They saw horrific atrocities. They never got education. They never just got a proper life.
So your family that didn't get out, they didn't get educated. What happened to them?
They went through war. I mean, they're struggling financially. They
survived the war.
Yeah, some survived war, some didn't.
Some got killed.
Some got killed. Yes, and others fled, and just for many years just kind of bounced around from refugee camps to try to get asylum somewhere else. So when other countries close borders and you're fleeing a country of civil war, that you're just trying to do everything you can, and this was happening now to people from those countries, Syria and Yemen and other countries that are subject to the ban.
Yeah. Well, Donald Trump, let me tell you, if you're watching, okay, here's a guy from Somalia, a country you said don't allow anybody in, who's doing a fabulous, fabulous job, not only for Spar Bernstein, but for all of America.
Yes.
And you're going to hear about this right now. So you had a client, you're an attorney, okay, very smart guy, probably one of the best interviews I ever had in a long time for an attorney.
Thank you.
Was Abadir. I was so impressed during the interview, I'm like, you're hired. Now, you had a client when you first came to us. He was in detention.
Right.
He was one of our clients. He was in detention. Tell us about what happened and why he was in detention.
So this client, he was originally from Bosnia. He's a student, and ICE just came to his house. His student visa had expired, and they knocked on his door. He had no criminal record. He didn't pose a risk to society. He wasn't anybody that's subject to mandatory detention, and they knocked on his door and they just detained him.
So he was certainly out of status, and under the law supposed to be put in deportation.
Correct.
But there's tens and tens of millions of people.
Right.
Okay. The statistic's 11 million.
Yes.
Probably a lot more.
Right.
But there's tens of millions of people, 11 million, whatever it is, out of status. ICE is not knocking on all these people's door, and this is a guy who lives in New York City, which is a sanctuary city.
Right.
Why did ICE come and knock on his door? All he did was overstay his time.
that part we still don't know. Like I said, he has no criminal record, and there's priorities to people that they detain, right? So generally, people are getting detained now. It's if ICE did a raid at a place of business, if somebody gets arrested for a traffic stop or commits some other crime, and then they're referred to ICE. But someone like him, who's at least
in New York City, just an overstay on a
sanctuary
student
city.
visa.
Yeah, he's a low priority. He should not have been detained.
And now their new policy is people who file applications for green cards or visas who get denied will also
be proceeded.
will also be. So he got picked up by immigration. Literally, they came and knocked on his door at I think 10 o'clock in the evening.
Yep, 10 in the morning actually.
At 10 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, he had just
right.
been
He just woken up.
He just woken up and
and they picked him up and they put him in detention.
Yes.
And I know that his friends and family came and hired us.
Right.
And ICE was not doing what? What are they supposed to do? And what didn't they do?
Right. So when ICE detains somebody, first they give them what's called a notice to appear, which is essentially like a charging document saying that this is all the allegations the service has against you. So they filed one. They're supposed to give one to the immigrant, and then they're supposed to take one and file it with the immigration court, and that begins your immigration proceedings.
And what happens if they don't do this? If they don't give you a piece of paper that says, and the NTA lists all the reasons why you're being deported. So if anybody's ever seen an NTA, the notice to appear, it'll say this is your name and this is your country you're from, and you came here on this visa and you overstayed your time, or you have a green card and you committed a crime, and it lists all the reasons why the government wants to deport you. And then that starts the case. Right. That starts the engine of the car to start the case moving.
Right.
So what happens if the government arrests you, puts you in jail, says we're going to deport you, but never hands you that piece of paper?
So if the government does that, they effectively procedurally shut you out from finding any relief from actually removal and from detention. So then, in this case, that's an unlawful detention.
So basically, to break it down, is that the government doesn't hand you that piece of paper. That doesn't start the car, the engine, to start your deportation process, to allow an attorney to go to court and make an argument. So without that piece of paper being handed to you, there's no court date.
Correct.
There's no court date, and he just sits in jail without ever having an opportunity to go to a judge and plead his case.
Yes.
And in this particular case, here's a guy who was on a student visa, never committed a crime. Yes, he overstayed. Immigration came to his door, knocked on his door, arrested him, threw him in jail, never gave him the NTA, and because they never gave him the NTA, he never got a court date. He just sat there in jail, rotting away.
Right.
And so what happened? Because he was our client.
Right, it's client. So so I'll just add to that. It's equivalent to if somebody was arrested and never got an arraignment, just sat in jail, and the prosecutor never read them their formal allegations of their charges, never put them in front of a court, and just had them sit in pretrial detention indefinitely. So in this country, you get your arraignment within 48 hours for criminal charges, and that's some of the most serious things that can serious legal proceedings somebody can go through. So it's similar to immigration, and especially when you're detained in this kind of context, it's quasi-criminal where they're unlawfully detaining. So
in this particular case, the only relief he has is go to the immigration service and say, please release me.
Right, exactly.
And they said no.
Yes.
And you can't get a judge to order them, no immigration judge, because he's never going to appear before a judge.
Yes, yeah. So in this case, the judge, he couldn't go to the court because the court didn't have jurisdiction because it wasn't filed. And then ICE was not entertaining his bond request. So, and what made it even worse is they set him out for a date on August 10th of 2018, and he was detained on July 13th. So he's held for almost a month.
They told him, okay, August 10th, you'll go see a judge, and until then, for those 4 weeks, you sit in jail, you rot, you do nothing.
Right.
Okay.
So August 9th comes around, and we called the immigration court to see if he was, if his hearing was going to come up the next day to get our bond request to be filed before the immigration court. And the court said, we don't have the NTA filed, so we can't accept your.
So they still never gave him any paperwork.
Yeah. So
even though he was told, and we were told the court date is August 10th.
Right.
He never got any paperwork. Court said we don't have him on the schedule. Sorry, you're not seeing a judge.
Exactly. So then we went to ICE to try to get. So if the immigration court does not have jurisdiction of your case, if it's not filed, you can go to ICE and request bond from them. So we went to ICE and said, all right, Well, first we complained about not having the NTA filed with the immigration court. Secondly, we said, all right, can we get a bond request from you guys? So we did a formal bond request saying he's not a flight risk.
We
he's
made
got
the,
no
r-
criminal
the
record.
proper applications.
Yeah, proper application, and did that. And then they didn't decide on the
Right,
bond
well-
request. They just sat on it and said, we'll get back to you. And
Eventually, I understand they said, well, the officer said, well, we have a policy now, we don't give bond to anybody.
Right.
And we have a policy now that you wait to see a judge, but since we're not giving you any paperwork, our policy basically is we're arresting people illegally and never giving them an opportunity to see a judge. And by the way, this is not just happening to our client, this is happening to thousands and thousands of people right now. There are thousands and thousands of people currently sitting in ICE detention who have never been given an opportunity to see a judge. Why is this happening?
So the government is using this as it's unlawful. So it's a new practice and procedure that they've done.
But is it in retaliation or is it in response to there was a Supreme Court decision?
Yes. So it's a response. So the Supreme Court came out with a decision, Pereira v. Sessions, saying that before the NTAs would say to be determined. So they would file an NTA they'd give an NTA to the immigrant and say your hearing is to be determined. So they wouldn't
meaning
even
that
know.
we're not going to give you a court date yet.
Yes, because it's to be determined. And so the Supreme Court made a ruling in Pereira v. Sessions and said those were unlawful, and the dates the NTA. I mean, like, as the Supreme Court said in Pereira, it's a notice to appear. So it's supposed to tell you time, date, and place of the hearing.
When to appear.
So
right. So if the notice to appear doesn't say when and where to show up,
Yeah.
the Supreme Court came, which is, remember, this is the document that starts your deportation case.
Right.
The Supreme Court said that's illegal. Now, there's three different groups of people that this affects.
Right.
There's people who are already in detention. There are people who need to see a judge. There are people who are already in deportation who will eventually see a judge but are not in detention. And there are people who have already been ordered deported. There's three different groups of people that this affects because the Supreme Court said that the way that the government was starting deportation cases on their NTAs was illegal. Now, what happened is that the Trump administration said, okay, all of these NTAs we've issued are illegal. We don't know when we're going to schedule hearing dates. We won't schedule hearing dates for any time in the future. Everybody's just going to sit in jail until we decide to schedule hearing dates. And when we decide to schedule hearing dates, then we'll give you a new NTA and allow you to appear in court and make your argument. That's basically what their policy was. And they were basically using the and they are still to this day using this Supreme Court decision as a back way to basically not give people their rights. And actually, the Pereira decision actually gave immigrants more rights.
Correct.
If you were ordered deported and you were never given a time and place on your NTA, that was an illegal deportation. If you are in detention right now and you have an NTA without a time and place, that's an illegal detention. So therefore, they're not giving any NTAs and they're just saying screw you to everybody.
Yes, and in this specific context, what made it even worse is so if you are detained, and like in our client's case, where they did give him a date, August 10th, and then August 10th comes around and that date ends up being canceled because they'd never filed it, right? They're by law required to issue another NTA with a proper date and time, and they didn't here. So, now they're doing that. They're just to satisfy Pereira, giving a time and date, but they're not filing with the immigration court because they're not actually. Pereira and Sessions.
They gave a time and date, but then those are BS.
Yeah, it's a ghost NTA.
Those are BS dates because when those dates show up, court has no record that you're supposed to be before the court.
Yes, yeah,
which is what happened to our client.
They're doing a lot of those
so
things.
now, basically, what we've just discussed was very, very to even me, it's complicated.
Very complex.
It's a very complex situation. But what to the person who's in detention, they're saying this isn't so complex. I'm sitting here in jail and I don't get to see a judge. Lawyer, what are you doing for me?
Right.
Okay, I hired a lawyer. Lawyer, do something. The lawyer says, well, what am I supposed to do? You can't see a judge. So what do? You can't see a judge.
Right.
What do you do?
What do? You file a writ of habeas corpus.
What is that?
And that is a federal lawsuit. It's a complaint
So you
for
say I don't
unlawful
see.
detention.
Basically, so you say is since I can't get to see an immigration judge, I'm going to go see a federal judge.
Exactly.
And you have to actually take the ball in your own court and say I want to see a federal judge. I'm being held illegally.
Yes. So writ of habeas corpus is a complaint for unlawful detention, and this is an example of unlawful detention where somebody is detained without ever being read their formal charges against them, without given an opportunity to have a custody determination hearing, and without an opportunity to seek relief from detainment or removal. So
you file the habeas corpus, which means in Latin actually bring the prisoner forward.
yeah, bring the body
Bring
forward.
the body forward.
Yes.
So basically what we're saying is this person is in jail illegally, and we want a federal judge to say that immigration's holding them illegally, and as a result they should be released. Because other than that, if we didn't file this habeas corpus, this guy would have been sitting in jail for another 6 months without a court date, basically rotting away. It's like what they do in dictatorships, okay, not in democracies, and certainly not the United States of America. So you file this habeas corpus. What happened within 24 hours?
Within 24 hours, ICE filed the NTA with the immigration court, and immigration court scheduled them for a bond hearing within 7 days.
Okay, so basically from the date that you didn't even have to show up in court. Did you show up in
We
court?
We did show up for the immigration
for
court.
the
bond
but
hearing,
for the
yes.
for the federal court you
For
never.
the federal court, no. And so the interesting part about it, so when we filed the habeas, the Department of Justice, after the immigration court set a bond hearing, they wrote a letter to the judge saying, all right, now that he's got his bond hearing, can we basically dismiss with the case? And I wrote a letter back saying, no, because my client is still unlawfully detained. Until he's out, this habeas is active because he's still unlawfully detained. Just because you set out a bond hearing, the last time you set out a bond hearing,
They
you canceled
canceled
it the day
it.
of.
Right.
So what's to say you're not going to do the same thing right now? So the judge agreed and kept the case active while the immigration court, had the bond hearing.
So you went to the bond hearing. What did the immigration judge say? Because now you had to go back to an immigration judge and get him bond.
Right.
And you're going to get bond on him if what do you got to prove?
If the client does not pose a risk to society and he's not a flight risk.
Those are the only two reasons. Bond is basically just to make sure you show back up to court and you're not going to do anything bad while you're waiting to show up to court.
Right.
So there was no reason. This guy has never had a criminal record. Has never done anything bad.
Yeah.
He has a claim for asylum
Right.
From his country, which we won't get into.
Right.
But certainly he has a claim for asylum. He has the right to stay here in America. What the government did was absolutely illegal. They basically, to break it down, was they went to a man's home, they arrested him, put him in jail, and says, you don't see a judge ever until we decide. That's not what happens here in America.
Yeah.
Now, eventually, we got onto this government's game, and Abadir went into federal court, and within 24 hours of going into federal court, the federal judge was absolutely up in arms that the government is doing this.
Right. Yes.
The government didn't even come in to make an argument. They know they were wrong.
Right.
And we had him released within 7 days of that,
Yes.
which is a fabulous result.
yeah.
Now, the reason we're saying this is happening a lot.
Yes.
It's not just happening to our clients, it's happening to many clients.
Right.
So if you or somebody you know is being held in immigration, the result, the way to fight immigration these days is, it's kind of like what the Democrats have to do with Trump. You got to fight fire with fire.
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
You can't sit back and just take punches anymore.
Right.
So you got to be aggressive. You got to go into federal court. You got to file habeas corpus that you're holding people illegally. You got to file APA claims, Administrative Procedure Act claims, that the government's not following their own rules. And you got to go into federal court and get federal judges to tell the Trump administration what they're doing is wrong. And that's what Abadir did. Yes. We had our client released. He will hopefully eventually should win his asylum case, and it was a fabulous job.
Right.
But this is the type of lawyering that you need now in this time and in this age.
Yes.
Okay, the type of lawyering that we sit back and we wait for immigration to do something, those days are over. Right. You need lawyers like Abadir.
Yes.
Like myself too, but
Right,
you need.
definitely.
I mean, we're not the only two in the world doing this.
Right.
But you need lawyers like us who are going to fight, go into federal court, and get you out of jail.
Right. Absolutely. Because this administration is just not following the rules, and like Brad said, you have to go in and do the APA claims, the Administrative Procedures Act, file mandamuses. A mandamus is where the court mandates USCIS to do an action right? So if they're delaying on a citizenship case, or delaying on a I-130 case, or
Green
green
card adjustment
case, you file mandamuses. APA claims are rampant in this administration because there's a set of practices and procedures, and this administration is circumventing them and just going about creating new policies like this one with the detaining people and not giving them a proper NTA and just detaining them unlawfully for an indefinite amount of time. That is outside of the proper procedures and regulations laid out by the Immigration Nationality Act and by the federal rules of regulation. So yeah, as Brad said, you have to go into federal court. You have to be litigious with this administration. You have to be aggressive, and you have to just strike back.
And when you do that, you get good results, like our client did, who was ultimately released in 7 days from the time you went into federal court.
Yeah. And the immigration judges are noticing. The immigration judge noted that this was egregious and that he basically spent 3 months in prison with no criminal record. And the moment he got in front of the judge, fast. He was
done.
Yeah, because they saw you have no criminal record. You've been here 5 years. You pay taxes. You're a law-abiding resident. You're an asset to society. You have a claim for relief. Why are you being detained?
Yeah,
You're not subject to any time mandatory detention, and you don't have any reason to be detained whatsoever. So
I mean, you see what's going on at the border, and now you see what's going on inside of the border as well.
Yes.
And it was a great job, Abadir. For those of you who need good immigration attorneys who are going to fight in federal court, you're looking at them right now. By the way, how do you like working here?
I love
8
it.
weeks,
I love it. Yeah, so
Yeah?
far so good. Yeah, I've been telling my friends and family and everybody that and they can notice when I speak to them and I tell them how happy that you seem, in a good place. So,
all right.
So thank you for the opportunity.
All right, thanks, and we look forward to more great work, and you'll be back on our show soon, hopefully.
Definitely.
Thanks again.